Hi folks, Joe Bongiovanni here from the Kettle Pond Institute, and I'm in Chicago at the American Monetary Institute Conference on Monetary Reform. And I'm here today with Dr. Joseph Huber. Dr. Huber, thanks very much for sitting down with me and having this little conversation. And Dr. Huber is a professor of economic sociology at Martin Luther University in Germany. And Dr. Huber is here from Berlin. You now have advanced your work to include your new website at sovereignmoney.eu, in which you have taken to explaining the differences between the currency teachings and the banking school theories, school teachings, and. One of the major sort of discussion points that are happening now out in the world of quote reforms, because sometimes I don't know what category to put things in when things evolve the way they do, but sort of reforms, is the modern monetary theory school of thought, which is an evolving school of thought that is gaining, some support. And I wonder if you would just explain how the modern monetary theory, as it's being presented today, fits into this scheme. And the reason that I'm asking this, I want to kind of frame this correctly, is that modern monetary theory claims to be public purpose, a public purpose initiative. That is to say, to use the monetary system for the public purpose. You go back to Warren Mosler's, kind of his original soft economics and all that. He goes on at great length to say that, the monetary system ought to be used to further the public interest. And of course, they have many positive social things with the job guarantees and all of that kind of stuff in there. But taking it back from economics, to the monetary question. Could you talk a little bit about how their perspective fits into this discussion?
Yeah, well, as you have said, modern monetary theory claims to represent a sovereign currency theory, and so one might expect it to be another modern currency teaching, but in actual fact, if you go in the details, then the modern monetary theory, or MMT for short, MMT approach, is actually rather ambiguous, because their understanding of what is chattel money or state money, it just refers to the first of the three elements of a state's monetary prerogative, as I mentioned earlier. So
which are?
Well, the first is determining the national unit of account, so to say the US dollar or the euro and so on. The second is issuing the money, and the third is seigniorage. And actually, according to the state theory of money of the 19th century, they just refer to the first one and leave creating the money and profiting from the privileges it gives to the issuer of the money. MMT leaves that to the private banking sector and assumes that through various ways, private banks are can be not really under control, but can somehow be influenced to act in accordance with the public interest, and that is something which, in my view, is highly problematic. The more so as MMTers themselves have their analysis of the present fractional reserve system is in quite many respects the same analysis as we have, and which is to say that actually the initiative of creating money is with the banks, and that central banks do not and cannot, as a matter of fact, exert some control over the quantity of money the banks create. They just try to influence what banks do by setting central bank interest rates, that the quantity of central bank monies is just a fractional part of the entire money supply. And so setting interest rates and setting them higher or lower, that actually affects immediately, say, the profit margins of the banks to a certain, I would say, minor extent, but banks react to that. But it does not at all affect the actual quantity of money banks are going to create. And MMT say that themselves. But at the same time, they assume that government and central bank together have that what banks do is somehow in the public interest, and they even assume that whenever the treasury spends money, this equals creating and spending state money, so to say. And in my understanding, that's really very, very far-fetched. There are some very, in my understanding, problematic, not to say dubious constructions behind, among other things, that the central bank and the treasury are consolidated in one sector. And so, and in the end, you can no longer, the boundaries are blurred. You can analytically, you know, it's difficult to distinguish who does what and so on.
Now, my understanding of that, if I could, because they pick up on the kind of functional financing, accounting norms, if you will, and in there they have been historically, structured that way. And so when I look at that, I say, well, yeah, that might work for understanding, how the macroeconomy is functioning, but that avoids the political economy reality that we're talking about, to me, which is the power, the money power, as Sadi referred to it. So that to me is a big difference. Now, in your talk, first of all, there's a lot of criticism among monetary reformers worldwide that we seem to be all wanting to reform the money system to make it work, better for the public, and yet we seem to be out in various pastures with our ways of looking at things. And you took the time in your presentation to say, in terms of comparing MMT to, the reform movement that that you and I are trying to advance. And I wonder if you could just say that, kind of address, well, what is it about MMT that might change, so that we could actually be sitting at the same table and sitting at the same conference and talking about how to square those corners to make something.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, you might better ask that question to MMTers and not to me, to myself.
Okay, I will. I promise.
Well, as far as I can see, I mean, in various passages of MMT writings, there are remarks in the sense that it's a strange situation that the government has to make a detour, so to say. It first has to sell its bonds to private banks, and then the banks refinance at the central bank and transfer, but just a small part of that government bonds to the central bank, which is seen as another government body.
Right.
Let's not discuss about that, which is a problematic assumption in itself, particularly in the United States. But this is so, and but that's the way MMT looks at that thing. And so of course the question is an obvious question: why making that detour and not directly sell government bonds IOU to the central bank And then the next step would be, why not directly issue government money instead of going in debt with it, and be at no interest with the central bank. And so if somehow this type of reasoning, which is a true currency type of reasoning, sovereign money reasoning, so somehow this is also inherent in MMT. And if MMTers would more explicitly come to the fore, would put it in that way more explicitly, then there might be a common basis, something we really could be pushing in common.